Hey, this is Othmer from AG Info. I want to show you our new report functionality in Cygnet. And this is, first of all, a free download. So if you're a user of Cygnet and you already have Cygnet, you can download this free update. If you go to our website, eginfo.com, and you click on Support, here under the Cygnet folder, you'll see a button that says Downloads and Updates. If you click on that, that'll always have the latest version of Cygnet, and we always make sure to give those away for free to you. So you see this report over here on the right side of my screen? I'm going to show you how to make one of those with the new version of Cygnet right now. First, let me go ahead and close that, and let's start a new session here in Cygnet. One of the great things about Cygnet is we make this easy for the clinician. We realize the real-world situation of working with clients and talking to clients, or maybe it's a young client and you're talking to their parents, and this is a real-world situation. We want to get that session running right away. So we make that really easy for you. You can just hit play in Cygnet, and boom, a session is up and running immediately. So we make that very, very easy to access. We don't want to bog you down with a lot of filling out information and so forth. But let's take that situation where you do want a recording of the session, you do want a report. And so at some point during that session, you maybe saw something interesting go by in the EEG and you say, hey, I want to record that. And so for whatever reason, you want to record the EEG or you want to get that report. You can do so at any time during the session by hitting this red record button. When I press that red record button, it brings up the record dialog, and that's going to go back and get the entire session. It will record all the EEG for that session, and it's going to let me create this report. So I'm going to create this as a new client. So I'm going to hit the new client button, and I'm going to type in Kevin here. And I could also use a client ID. A lot of offices use ID numbers instead of names. We hit OK on that, and that's going to create this new client. And you see over here on the right, it brings up this new report. Let me walk you through the report a little bit. First of all, you see the client's name at the top. That's the name that we just entered, or the ID if we'd used an ID number. It says session number 0. And we started session number 0 because that's usually the evaluation session for us. We're usually starting with an evaluation, and then we kind of count the first session in the clinic as session number 1. And if you want to go ahead and change that to be session number 1, you can just highlight it and type in 1. Or maybe you've just downloaded the new version of Cygnet and you've done 20 sessions with a client and you want to start using the report with that client. So then this would be session number 21. So you can enter in whatever number works for you. I'm going to go back and change that to a 0. And the next time I open the report, it's automatically going to increment to be session number 1, which is very cool. It already knows some things. It knows what type of session this is. It's one-channel EEG. I'm going to show you alpha theta in a minute. It shows the session date, so it knows that already. And it would already know the clinician's name if this was a second session or a later session for this client. But it doesn't know me yet, so I'm going to type in my name. And notice it gives me this little pull-down option here, so I could grab my name from the history. If I'd worked on this computer before and already had my name in there, it allows me to just pull that down. So switching clinicians can be really easy if you have multiple clinicians using your system. This next box has to do with the client's preferences. You're going to actually see this on the report. And this can change during the session. It can change over time. But this is actually going to be printed on the report. So you'll know this client prefers to use the tactile bear, tactile feedback. Maybe it's a bear, maybe it's a puppy, but the tactile feedback. Also the game controller to steer the game, maybe steering the inner tube, steering the car in dual drive, steering the train in toy train. If the client likes to use that, maybe we'd be selecting inner tube or dual drive in their preferred game list, and we'd know they like to use that game controller. Maybe your client is using Advanced Media Player, and you're watching Toy Story, and you are 31 minutes into Toy Story. You can actually write that down. The next time your client comes in, you're looking back at his record and saying, I see last time you were here, you were watching Toy Story. We were 31 minutes in. We don't have to spend a lot of time hunting for, where was this? Did you see this part already? Very convenient. Let's talk about this next bit here, setting up the electrode placements. First of all, we have time. Now, I could click in here and type a time, but we've also put in some normal selections that people often use. Often, if we're doing 3 placements, we'll have 10, 10, and 10 to make that 30-minute session. So I'm going to go ahead and select 10, but again, I could just highlight and type in 11 if I wanted to. Let's go ahead and select a site. I'm going to say, let's start here with T3, T4. Notice that appears over here on the head on the left. And I'm going to select a training frequency here. It defaults to 0001, but again, very easy to use these arrows on the right to select the frequency that I want. Or I can just highlight that and change this. This is just a recording of what you're doing. This doesn't actually set it in Cygnet. That's a separate piece. I can then hit add a site and say I'm going to then do another 10 minutes here, and let's do this one at T3 FP1, and maybe I'm going to change the frequency there to 0002, for example. And let's add another site here, do another 10 minutes, and this is going to be P4. T4. If I wanted to delete a site, I could hit delete site, and then I'm only doing 2 sites, and I could change the time and so forth. So this is a record of what I've accomplished. Let's go to this report section. First, the box at the top that says report is designed to be the information that you're getting from the client, really from the last session, between the last session and today. So how did they sleep last night? How was the day yesterday? Or over the time spanning since the last session. And so we're going to get a report like headache gone, no further headache since the last session, today feeling a little sleepy. So we might have a report like that from the client. The observation is really your observation in the session and what the client is reporting to you. And so you're getting information, much calmer with T4, P4. You're getting information about how they're responding. So this is where you're going to be writing a lot of notes. You might go back and put something else in the report section at the top if they say, oh, I forgot to tell you, yesterday I also had such and such happen. And you could go back and add that to this report section at the top. The plan is really your notes to yourself about what you're expecting to have happen and what your expected changes are when you see those changes. So it's really your dialogue about what you're expecting to do. And that can, of course, get updated as you're going. But this is sort of your plan of what your expectations are. So you might see something like, I'm planning to add FP1 if I see such and such. So this is really your plan. And this is really key for certification. This is the main element that we're going to want to see for the certification piece. A couple cool features of this report. One is that it has spell check built in. So if you make a little typo, it puts this red squiggle under there. And as we're familiar with doing with so many other programs, you just right-click on that and it'll give you spelling suggestions. You may need to add some brain particular terms in there, and you just hit add to dictionary and it'll have those going forward. Another really cool thing is if I like to write a lot of notes, I can actually do that. And notice that I get this slider over here on the right. I can actually write pages of notes and it'll just print onto the second page. But one thing that's really cool, we were actually surprised to find this, is that you can fit a lot of notes on here before it goes onto the second page. So there's actually a huge amount of room, even just the way it's built right now. Another thing is if you have trouble seeing the report, or maybe you have a smaller resolution screen, and maybe you want to do this kind of setup that I have, and you want to shrink the report down or zoom the report in so that you can see it better, you can do that with the Control plus and minus. So notice when I hit Control and touch the plus key, the report gets much bigger, and then I can scroll around in these scroll bars and scroll around and see that report. So if I have trouble seeing a report, working on a tiny laptop for instance, you can zoom in and see that report better. It's very useful. And then just Control minus to zoom back out again to get that full screen. At this point, you've got the report mostly filled out. You're going to be entering some more information as you go through this session. But here at the beginning of the session, I have taken the time to enter the electrode placements and the expected frequencies, and I've entered some notes. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. For those of us who work with computers, I'm sure you'll relate to that. It's a great idea to hit save. But notice what happens when I hit save. It actually closes and shrinks down, and it hides down here in this Edit Report button. I'm going to go ahead and click that. It'll bring the report back up. It's actually a great way to work to leave the report on the screen if you have the screen space to do it. These larger monitors, you can really do that where you have the report and Cygnet up at the same time. But if you prefer to be shrinking this down, minimizing it, and working with those two screens on top of each other, then that's also a great way to work, and you can just sort of minimize that or even close that and bring it back up again with that Edit Report button. Now once we finish the session with Kevin here, we're going to go ahead and end the session, and we do that by just pressing the stop button. Notice I've left the report open on the screen, and I'm just going to hit stop. That's going to end my recording, and it's going to close my report. So I'm going to hit stop. Here you see the report comes up on my screen. I have the trend lines, I have all the information at the top, the preferred feedback, it shows a little picture of the tactile bear and the game controller, shows what I typed here, the Toy Story at 31 minutes, shows all those electrode placements and the frequencies. Let me show you something particularly useful here. At the top of the trend lines, I actually have written the real training frequency that I was using. Now, this was a demo session, so I just had it set at 0.01. And this is actually where I trained. So if you have an odd result from the client saying, hey, the sessions were just going great, and yesterday's session was just really terrible, I was really horrible after that session, you can go back in your notes and look and make sure, yes, I did have them at the same training frequency that I intended to have them at. Or did something get bumped? Did something get moved and I accidentally trained them somewhere else? This will record that and it'll show you where it was that you were training. With the report all complete, I have a few options. I can hit print and get that normal Windows dialog that allows me to print to a local or a networked printer and put that in the client's folder if I want to have a printed record. I can also, at this stage, hit edit report, make some changes. I can also hit save and close, and this just saves it. Actually, it's already saved. You don't really need to hit save and close. You can just close it and it'll already stay saved. So we do a good job of protecting you there. And this will go into the client's folder in Cygnet. I'll show you how to get there in a moment. And that'll give us all the reports for this client. So there's sort of a duplicate record there. So if you want to keep computerized records, you can do that. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Now let's talk about the next session for Kevin. Kevin comes back in for his first session in the clinic after his evaluation session. I'm going to hit play and get that session going for Kevin here. And then at some point during that session, I'm going to hit record, choose his name, and hit OK. Notice we have some information pre-filled. It's saying automatically session number 1 for Kevin. The clinician is already filled. The date and session type are already filled. His preferences with games are already filled. And I may update this, and now we'll be at 60 minutes here in Toy Story. I can make changes to all his electrode placements, but they're pre-filled with where I was working last time. So I have a reminder of where I was. And the report, observations, and plan are all blank and ready for us to work. One of the other really cool things I can do at this phase is say open last report. Let me see what my notes were last time and see what was my plan, what was I expecting to do. So this brings up this previous report here for Kevin, and I can see all the information from that previous session. What if we want to go back further than just the previous session? In this case, we only have one previous session, but let's say I want even more information. I've done 20 sessions, and I want to go back and see previous reports. I can do that. Let me show you how. If I go here under Cygnet and I choose Open Session Folder, this brings up the session folders. And here's the session folder for Kevin. And in here we have two key pieces of information that I want you to see. One is this EEG data file. This is actually the recording of his entire EEG for that session. Remember, all I had to do was hit record once during that session to get the entire EEG for the whole 30-minute session. Here's the report. It's got the little PDF icon on it. If I double click on that, that brings up that previous report. If I had more reports in there, I could click on those and I would have access to those reports as well. One more thing to note on this record feature, if I just want to record the EEG and I don't want to edit the report, that's fine too. I would just get sort of a basic report that says no session notes saved, so I could just have the trend lines and the frequency recorded in that report. But if I don't enter any other information, it would just be left with the trend lines and the reward frequency with nothing else there. And that's fine too, so you don't have to fill out the report. Now let's switch over to Alpha Theta. Our new client, Kevin, after doing a couple of wake state sessions, has now decided to try Alpha Theta. So let's look at what that report looks like. When I hit the record button, again, I can select Kevin. He's already in the list, and I hit OK. Up comes the report. Notice the report looks a little bit different. First of all, it has said, yes, you are on session number 2. So it's tracking his progressive numbers of sessions, but it's changed the report to be an Alpha Theta report. So the sessions become sequential, but the tracking of the report is relevant to whether it's an awake state or an Alpha Theta session. And it'll actually pull the electrode placements from a previous awake state session for a future awake state session. It will pull Alpha Theta electrode placements for a future Alpha Theta session. So it remembers which previous type of session you were doing, and it pulls that information forward. So let's go ahead and say, yeah, he likes the tactile, and he likes the headphones, he likes the eye shade, and he also likes the blanket. Now, we're going to say he's going to do 30 minutes here. Again, if I wanted to change that, I could type in and say 35. The site he's going to use is going to be PZA1, all the way down at the bottom here. And then we can individually adjust the alpha frequency and the theta frequency if we've individually manipulated those during the session. So both of those frequencies are listed there. And again, we could hit add site, and we have the same report, observations, and plan here. I now want to show you the difference when we switch to 2-channel Alpha Theta, and I hit record. And again, we're going to select Kevin here. This now becomes his 3rd session, and Notice we have a slight difference. First of all, it knows it's alpha theta, so it kept my notes from the one-channel alpha theta as we switch over here to two-channel. But we have a different selection here. So again, we're going to say 30 minutes, but now I have 2 sites. So notice what happens after I set up the alpha theta electrodes. Notice I just set P3 and P4 as my plus sites and A1 and A2 as my minus sites. And notice what that does on the head here. It shows P3, P4 as this red line, saying that's the plus. We're doing P3 plus P4. And then the reference electrodes here are at A1 and A2. One last thing I want to show you here in the new Cygnet report is that if you're in a large office, and even if you just have an awake state system and an alpha theta system, and you want to have that same client, you're saying to yourself, hey, if I had Kevin as a client and he was in our awake state room and then he went into the alpha theta room, we wouldn't have him in the list. One really cool thing we can do here is if I go up to settings and I choose set session folder path, I can actually select a network location. So if I hit browse folders and I have a network location set up on all my clinic computers, I can actually select a network location to be the session folder path. That way all of the session folders are going into one location. And then if you go on to any system and you hit record and you see that list of clients, you're going to see the same list of clients as every other system in your office that's on that network share. So this is really good for those larger offices where you have lots of awake state systems, lots of alpha theta systems. They can all be looking at the same folder, and it doesn't matter which system you walk into, you're going to see the same list of clients on every single computer in there. That's our new session report. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for listening.